Please begin, ma'am. You are live.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
You. When am I supposed to start? You please inform me.
Yeah, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Madam, you can start.
Okay, sir. Good morning to one and all present here. It is an immense pressure. Sir, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. It's an immense pleasure to take an opportunity to conduct a webinar on behalf of our Department of Pharmacy Practice, Parul Institute of Pharmacy, and also I would like to thank to give this opportunity to the Parul Institute management, Dr. Divanshu sir, and also our principal and dean, Dr. Abhay Dharamsi sir, and for the technical support and digital learning, digital side to Mr. Brijesh sir. I would like to introduce the speaker, Dr. Kishore Nyanasam sir. He is working as Associate Professor and Director of Experimental Education, College of Pharmacy, Gulf Medical University, Ajman, and he is qualified from BPharm, MPharm, and PhD from Manipal University, and he did his postdoctoral training in Wisconsin Hospital, Wisconsin University, United States of America, and he has a wide experience. He served as a associate dean, College of Pharmacy, GMU for past 6 years, and he served as a head of the department pharmacy practice for 2 years, and he is having more than 15 years of teaching experience in the Department of Pharmacy Practice. He also served as a clinical pharmacist for more than 8 years in Kasturiba Hospital, Manipal University, and he established clinical pharmacy services at Tumbai Hospital, Ajman, UAE, and also he published more than 55 research papers in reputed peer-reviewed international journals. He guided more than 20 students at postgraduate level and also for the PharmD students. He is having a wide experience in designing and coordinating clinical trials, developing clinical guidelines, pharmacovigilance, toxicovigilance, drug utilization evaluation, antibiotic sensitivity pattern, drug formulary, and pharmaceutical care programs. He served as the Executive Secretary of Association of Community Pharmacists since 2007 to 2010. He is an annual member of ISPRO, the International Society of Pharmacoeconomics and Outcome Research USA. He is also a member of ACCP, American College of Clinical Pharmacy. He has presented papers in 3 countries like USA, China, and Malaysia. He is also an invited speaker for FIP World Congress titled on what is evidence, current trends, barriers, and best practices of ADR at Hyderabad. And also he is a resource person for continuous medical education to the community pharmacists. And also he is a resource person for AACT sponsored quality improvement program for teachers. Welcome you, sir.
Hello. Good morning.
Yes, sir.
Thank you,
Over.
Dr. Lavanya, and thank you very much for this introduction. First
Yes,
of
sir.
all, I want to thank the Institute of Parul University and for giving me this opportunity to participate as a guest speaker. And I want to thank the Dean. Sir, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to be part of your team. And also, I thank Dr. Lavanya for arranging all this wonderful meeting today. And I welcome all the students and the faculty of Parul University. Good morning to you, sirs, and welcome, madam. And ma'am, today I am going to discuss about research methodology, which is very common for all departments. It's not only particularly for pharmacy practice. This particular research methodology is applicable for all type of departments, including pharmaceutics, including pharmacognosy, and also non-pharmacy people also. It's very useful because this is about creating evidence. So I want to just start the topic. I want to introduce about systematic reviews. I think all of you might have heard about this topic called systematic reviews or meta-analysis. So here I am mainly focusing on how we can develop as new people, as introducing for the new students, PharmD students, as well as for the faculty or maybe for other university faculty. I would recommend that this is a very good systematic review, is the best method of research methodology. And today we are going to go discuss about the practical approach. So it's going to be more about the clinical approach. How am I going to conduct a systematic review? And we are going to see how, I'm going to give you some examples, and I'm going to share my experience about this systematic review and how we encourage students as well as postgraduate students in this research methodology. Okay, so let me begin. So today we are going to talk about systematic review. We are going to approach this particular topic under methodological purview. We are going to study about how we are planning, designing, development, and also we need to critically appraise the systematic reviews that we have also developed. So as we begin, I am just going to give you the objectives of this today's training. At the end of this particular session, we expect that the audience is going to learn what is systematic review. We are going to compare systematic review with meta-analysis, okay, and we are going to study how this is going to happen and how this is going to really be important in our real practice, in our professional clinical practice, as well as in our research practice. So it is also going to, we are going to discuss about the important steps that we are going to approach during the development of the systematic review. And we are going to study about the critical appraisal of articles. As we know, we are going to collect articles during this process, and these articles must be critically evaluated for precision, for the validity, and we are going to study about how to critically appraise the quality of the research articles that we are collecting. And finally, we are going to use this information into our real practice. So we are going to interpret such findings from research articles and how we are going to help in decision-making process. So usually decisions are made in the hospital, and pharmacists are going to participate in decision-making. So clinical pharmacists are helping doctors in making absolute good decisions about the choice of medicine, about the appropriate dose selection, and optimizing the therapy. So it's very important for clinical pharmacists to provide a very optimal drug information service. So this is a very important practice decision-making process during the drug information process. So I think we are going to study about these topics today. So in the beginning, I just want to start off with a case. Okay, I'm going to introduce a case where a 59-year-old male patient, he had a history of hypertension, and he has now stage 2 renal failure. Okay, so now this particular patient is asking about the salt diet. There were conflicting information from various resources about the amount of salt that he must take. So we have 4 multiple choice options. There is one option is about using 1 teaspoonful of sodium chloride a day. The second option is using 9 grams of sodium chloride. This is equal to a tablespoon of sodium chloride every day. There is another option that is many literatures are saying that there is no need to take salt in your food. So these are the 3 different options. And there is another option which says, oh no, there is nothing to worry about salt. There is nothing to do with your hypertension or your renal failure. You can take as much as salt as you require. So these are some of the conflicting answers for the hypertension patient. So now the patient is absolutely confused. Now it is the duty of the clinical pharmacist. He's going to find a good answer for this particular patient. So how much of salt can I take in a day? So now if the pharmacist goes by his own decision, by his own intellection, by his own knowledge, he will decide that he should not add any salt. But you know very well, there is a scientific background of sodium chloride, which is required for the heart functioning as well as for the muscle action. So we need a certain amount of salt. So now there are various amount of evidences. So we have to collect evidences for the decision. This is where we are now getting into the process of decision making. So we are not taking decision by our own brain, by our own memory, or by our own learning, or by our own experience. We don't take decisions in clinical practice. So in clinical practice or in any general process, it is important to consult literature. When we consult literature, we will have many answers to this particular question. How much of salt can I take? There were studies done in USA, and it was decided that 1 tablespoon of salt is enough for the patient in a day. And later studies in UK, they proved that no, there is no need for 1 tablespoon, which could be more than 10 grams. So they did some randomized clinical trials called as RCT trials, and they proved that 9 grams of sodium chloride is very safe, and patient can continue with 9 grams of salt in a day, and he will not have any complications. Then there were latest studies in the USA by the American Heart Association. They came to a conclusion that no, there is no need to add salt because food contains enough salt by its own nature, like bread or if against by vegetables, they have their own salt content, and that salt is more than enough for the body requirement, and there is no need for salt. So these are the three conflicting answers from different countries by different randomized clinical trials. So as a clinical pharmacist, what decision should I take and what decision should I inform my doctor? So in this particular situation, I should do certain literature search. I should go for evidences. So that is where I have to do certain process called a systematic review. Now, a systematic review is a systematic method of collecting evidences. Systematically, we are collecting all literatures related to salt, for example, in a particular topic. For example, the use of salt, sodium chloride in hypertensive patients. So I'm selecting a topic and I'm going to collect certain articles in a very systematic way, in a standardized format, in a very comprehensive. I should not miss any article. I must comprehensively search, and it is something called as explicit search. Explicit means I'm doing a direct search in the particular database. We have many databases like PubMed, we have Medline, we have Embase. So there are many databases. We are going to use direct, very particular, very unbiased search, and we are collecting all the literatures, and then we are arranging those literatures. We are critically appraising those literature. Is this the study worthwhile to include into our systematic review? So we collecting many articles. We are evaluating the quality of literature. Some are observational studies, which I can exclude. I am going to observe only randomized clinical trials or RCTs, and I'm collecting certain RCTs for my systematic review. And I decide upon the particular trial. Which trial am I going to include into my systematic review? Once I collect all the literatures, I critically evaluate those literatures. Then I am going to collect the data. I am going to see how many patients were studied and what was the clinical outcome and what was the relative risk. Like how many patients improved with 9 grams of salt, how many patients improved with only one teaspoon of salt, and how many patients improved without salt. So I'm going to analyze the data of each clinical trial, and I'm going to pool the data. I'm going to collect the data from each study, and I am doing a data analysis. So that's called extraction of data, analysis of data, and then I am synthesizing my own outcomes. Now I am going to conclude that this particular format of sodium chloride is very, very useful for this patient. And this is where we take decisions based on past literatures and randomized clinical trials or any other thing. This can be very applicable even in selection of drug, selection of dose, and also in the pharmacokinetic decision makings. So I'm just going to define systematic review. Systematic review is defined as a standardized and a systematic or a comprehensive search of all relevant articles, and then they are formulated into a based on the research question or based on the research topic. Then these literatures are then reanalyzed by critical appraisal. We have to rule out if there's any bias, and then we are going to analyze those data, individual study data, into one pooled data, and then I am going to draw conclusions from that particular study. This is called a systematic review. So why systematic review is very important? If you see the ladder of evidence, if you see here, animal studies are the very basic research that most of us do. In Indian context, if you see, most of our pharmacy colleges are very experts. They are doing a lot of studies on animal studies. They are screening a lot of drugs. They are screening the safety of drugs in the animal studies. And that is the end of that. We have done a lot of herbal studies and we stop there. And this time, if you see the ladder of evidence, these animal studies, the anecdotal evidence, expert opinion, all are in the lowest rank of the ladder. Okay, and then we should learn how to apply this particular research in human beings. So we have something called as case series. So in case series, we are using this particular drug in few patients, selected cases. Like for example, we can use certain Ayurvedic drugs in certain human population in few of the patients. Like case series include 14 patients or 24 patients or 6 patients in each group. And then we are drawing conclusions from small studies. These are called as case series. So they are also in a lower ladder. And if you see the evidence, this evidence is building up with more case control studies. These are called cohort studies. Cohort studies are pre-observational studies. And then we have the higher ladder, we have the randomized control studies. These are controlled trials where they have a control group, we have the test group, we have the positive control group, negative control group, and then we do proper randomized clinical trials. And these randomized control trials are published in renowned journals like New England Journal of Medicine, the Lancet Journal, And also we have journals, a very, very British Medical Journal. And these are wonderful journals which have published these randomized controlled trials. And if you see, this has very high good evidence. The strength is increasing towards from the baseline towards the right. As you see, there is an increase in the strength of the evidence as we go up the ladder. And there is a decrease in bias. Can you see there is a decrease in bias on the right side? As we go up the ladder, there is a decrease in bias. Now, beyond all this ladder, you can see something called a systematic review. This is the highest quality of research anybody can do. In this systematic review, we are collecting all literatures done on randomized trials, on cohort studies, case control studies, observational studies, and then this data is then pooled together, and the data of each patient, you mean the total population, is collected into a one pool, and there is a statistical analysis, very simple analysis we are doing, and then we are drawing conclusion about an efficacy of your drug or a safety of a drug, or maybe a decision like simple like the salt intake, a diet or exercise, effect of exercise in outcome of a disease. All such decisions are taken by systematic reviews. And if you see, there is one more very important step beyond this that is called meta-analysis. Meta-analysis has the highest hierarchy of evidence. So this is the highest evidence in all research, medical research, or in any type of research. If you see, there is meta-analysis. So in systematic review, we are collecting all literatures and we are pulling the data and we are drawing conclusions. These are simple studies. But in meta-analysis, we are doing something called as the funnel plot, or we call it as a forest plot. Okay, we are drawing all this data that is being collected in systematic review, and we are showing it in a graph called as the forest plot, and then we are showing in a pictorial demonstration about the efficacy of a drug or the efficacy of a particular intervention. So the meta-analysis is the highest hierarchy of evidence. So this is a very important diagram whenever we remember about the evidence, quality of evidence. So the higher the quality of evidence, the greater the applicability. So meta-analysis can be easily applied into our decision making. A systematic review can be easily included into our practice, daily practice. A systematic review can be very helpful in developing therapeutic guidelines. You know, clinical pharmacists are authorized and they are supposed to be trained to develop clinical guidelines. So whenever we want to develop a decision in the clinical guideline, you have to look for systematic reviews and interpret the data that is available in systematic reviews. And then we are going to incorporate into our clinical decision guidelines, and we are going to use it in our daily practice. So this is where the hierarchy of evidence develops, and the word systematic review is the highest quality of evidence. And beyond that, we have something called meta-analysis. So we must know how to differentiate between meta-analysis and systematic review. I'm going to show you later. Now, who are the people who are going to do systematic review? Clinical pharmacists are very helpful in decision making. When a doctor wants to select an appropriate drug, he wants to compare a drug A and drug B, and he wants to choose between A or B. Then the doctor will ask the pharmacist to provide drug information. So the clinical pharmacist will collect all literature. He will do a systematic review, and he will inform the doctor about the most appropriate choice. And he has to also help the doctor in choosing the best dose. And also he must help the doctor in monitoring the outcome of a therapy, whether the drug is effective or not, whether the drug is producing its expected effect or if it's producing any toxicity. So all these things are part of the decision making by clinical pharmacists. So clinicians are also nowadays involved in this systematic review because they are developing newer systemic like surgeries, surgery techniques, surgery interventions are also introduced. So they want to know the evidence, and they are also participating. B.Pharm students, PharmD students are very useful, can also do systematic review because it is very helpful in publications. As you know, nowadays, universities are ranked according to the number of publications, isn't it? So you can see many of the foreign countries, they all have very good impact journals, and these impact journal articles are very useful in their career. For example, they can grow their career in research by doing systematic review. Any student can begin their systematic review even from the second year. So this is an experiment we started doing in our college, and students from the very first year are introduced to the systematic review, and then we are training them in the second year, and by the time they finish third year, they have one publication of systematic review in their own career, in the B.PharmD, the Doctor of Pharmacy program. So we have introduced that, and we are doing it very seriously, and we are now training students to be expert in systematic review, and it's very useful. And nowadays students have published a lot of articles. So they begin in the beginning of the second year of PharmD, they have started publishing with systematic reviews. And also, like we have Cochrane group of authorities, they develop clinical guidelines, and you know very well, we have NCCN guidelines. We have guidelines called American Heart Association guidelines. We have the GOLD guidelines. Okay, we have the American Rheumatoid Arthritis guidelines. We have many cancer guidelines, Australian guidelines. All guidelines are developed based on the evidences, and all evidences are developed based on systematic review and meta-analysis. So that's why it's very, very useful for all type of professionals, including non-clinical pharmacists. So when you want to develop good research, you do an animal study. The next step is to try it on human clinical trials, RCT, and collect all RCT literatures. And then you are supposed to expected to do a systematic review. And that is how we implement our basic research in the real practice. This is what's called translation of research. The initial findings must be translated into real practice. This is where the meta-analysis and systematic reviews are very, very helpful. And it is a milestone and it is a life-changing experience. Okay, now why we need to use systematic review? There are plenty of journals that are being published. More than millions of articles are available in the internet. You can see here, you go to PubMed, you can see thousands of journals, and each journal they have thousands of articles. So there are millions and millions of articles available in the resource. Now, as clinical pharmacists, we are going to derive the most appropriate literature for our evidence. So that's why we need to learn what is systematic review, and it is very helpful in identifying the most appropriate research question. For example, we talked about salt intake, isn't it? So based on that salt, we need to have a research question, and that research question is then proved by appropriate and most explicit search. And we are trying to find out the best article or the best evidences that are being done on that particular research question. So in decision making, I have just told you, whenever in clinical practice, doctor wants to know the comparison between drug A and drug B, he wants evidence. So if he will not give the medicine unless there is a proper evidence. If you show evidence from a systematic review or a meta-analysis, then the doctor will accept to give that particular drug. So this is how we help doctors in decision making, in selection of antibiotics, in selection of cardiovascular medications. And you know very well, there are a lot of medicines that are being discovered. In 2019, there you know about, I just want to share my experience of Lifamulin, which is an antibiotic, which we are doing a systematic review. And our postgraduate student is doing that research review on Lifamulin, which was just launched in 2019. So every year there is a new drug that is being introduced into the market, isn't it? So when there is a new drug that is launched into the market, we do not have evidence. So we need to compare the drug with the existing antibiotic outcomes, and then we need to show whether the new drug is having therapeutic efficacy or no. That is where we take decisions about new drugs that are launched. So it's very useful in deciding the best drug for the patient. So we can also minimize bias. You know very well, some people have bias. For example, I have been practicing for 20 years, and I know that salt is not at all safe. So I have certain bias that salt is not good for the patient. So I am biased. But if another new discovery with a new clinical trial is just launched, or a new meta-analysis available on use of 5 milligram of sodium chloride is more safe compared to 9 milligram, then then I have to change my mind. I have to switch over to a newer decision. So this is all avoiding of bias. So many people, many wrong practices or many medical errors, medication errors occur because of bias. And there is a lot of errors can happen because of biased decision making. So pharmacists must provide the best evidence and help in decision making and selection of the most appropriate, most safe, and most efficacious medicine for the patient. Okay, so I was just telling you about the new molecules. Can you see here? So it's 1933, there were no drugs discovered. Very, very few drugs were discovered, and the rate of drug discovery is increasing over years. And by 2013, you can see here more than 200,000 drugs have been discovered. We can see there are about 3,000 to 4,000 drugs in the current market. Okay, so you can see the number of articles published and the number of new molecules that are being entering into our market. So as clinical pharmacists, we are expected to create evidence. So we are creating evidence, and then we are helping in decision making. So after we decide, we know what is systematic review, I think. So you all of us know systematic review means collection of literature. Very systematically, you collect literature, collect all the evidence, and then you are drawing conclusions based on the data. So there is something called meta-analysis. Meta-analysis means using that data, we are developing certain interpretations using forest plot or forest diagram or funnel plot. Okay, funnel graphs we use, and we are depicting the picture of our findings in systematic review. So it is just the next step of systematic review. It is also a part of systematic review. So you can see here, meta-analysis is also part of. Can you see this intersection? So systematic review includes many meta-analysis also, because meta-analysis means collection of data and pooling the data and drawing conclusions. That's meta-analysis. Okay, I'm going to show you the difference between meta-analysis and systematic review. So systematic review is nothing but collection of literatures. So you have a research question. This is very, very important. Okay, the development of a research question or a topic is very, very important. Selection of the topic. It should be very, very explicit. The word means it should be very clear. It should be very, definite. Okay, protocol. The question should be definite. It should be well-designed question. I will teach you how to develop a research question, a very important step of our research. Okay, so based on the research question, you're collecting all studies, you're comprehensively collecting all the literatures, then you are appraising all the data, all the studies, you are collecting it together and finding out inclusion criteria or exclusion criteria. So if you want to include it, if only RCT, we are including some studies. If it's an observational study, we exclude it out. So this is called as exclusion of criteria and inclusion of criteria based on the bias or based on the type of study. And then we are using this particular study to be very systematic. And since it is very systematic, it is reproducible. Anyone can do this research, including a young PharmD graduate can start doing this research right from the first year. This is what we start training our students from PharmD. We start giving them about literature review, how to provide drug information service, how to give them how to select a journal, how to critically appraise a journal article. This kind of training we are providing you in the very first year itself. Yes. And now, as I told you, what is meta-analysis? Meta-analysis is the next step of systematic review. Here we are collecting the study result from the systematic review, collecting all the result, and then we are making it more clear by using some formula called as the confidence interval and the relative risk calculation and odds ratio. I'm going to teach you about how we are going to do the odds ratio and systematic and the relative risk. And then we are going to analyze this data in a systematic way. And we are showing it in a graph called as the funnel plot, isn't it? Funnel plot or the forest plot. We are using to depict this particular data, which is found in systematic review. After we do the systematic review, collection of data is done in systematic review. This data is then made simple and made in a clear depiction in a picture called as the forest plot or the funnel plot. So this is what we call meta-analysis. I think now we are very clear about these two evidences. These two are the best evidences in clinical research, and any decision making like clinical guidelines or any national decisions like WHO decisions for any therapy. For example, we have COVID now. We had a lot of evidences about hydroxychloroquine. Now that drug is not used alone. So now we have Remdesivir. Now this drug is being shown to have promising effect. Now there are many trials being going on. Then all these trials are then collected into one study, and then we are taking a decision whether hydroxychloroquine can be given as a monotherapy for patients with COVID. Or we have another study, we have now Remdesivir, whether this drug can be used in combination or whether you can give it as a monotherapy along with other drugs. So this kind of decision making is done based on such clinical trials, and based on clinical trials, we are developing systematic reviews and meta-analysis. Okay, now the main goal of our study is to study how to develop a systematic review. This is a very important competence, this is a very important skill, and it's a very simple skill, nothing to be afraid of. And I always recommend now students should start doing this systematic review. That is my main purpose of helping you as a guest lecturer. I have come here to help all of you to start preparing a systematic review. How do you go about preparing a systematic review? The first step is to develop a research question. Can you see here? It is a research question. This is very, very important for us. I think I gave you an example. The patient who was 56 years old, he had history of hypertension, he had a history of renal failure, and now we need to decide whether we need to include sodium chloride for this patient. How much of sodium chloride is helpful for this patient? This is what is our question, research question, isn't it? So we included the patient data, isn't it? We used patient. That's why we call PICO. Can you see here? That's called PICO. PICO means patient. In the research question, you should include the patient. Where is the patient hypertension? Yes. Is the patient renal failure? Yes. So we are going to study the effect of drug in or sodium chloride in or any intervention in patients with renal failure or in patients with hypertension. Intervention. What is the intervention? Sodium chloride is our intervention. Whether sodium chloride is safe in this patient. Okay. Comparison. I want to compare between two groups, isn't it? I want to compare 9 grams of sodium chloride with no sodium chloride. Or I want to compare with 1 tablespoon of sodium chloride with no sodium chloride group. So I have two groups of comparisons. So I am going to compare two groups of treatment, two groups of interventions I'm comparing. And the outcome, what is my clinical outcome? Is the patient worsening with the symptoms? Does he develop further complications of renal failure, or whether he's developing end-stage renal failure, or whether he's having recovery, remission from renal failure? That is what we look for. Our goal is always to help in remission, help the patient to improve from the comorbidities and the complications. So we need to decide based on a research question. So the research question is developed using a PICO model. What is PICO model? P stands for population, I stands for intervention, C stands for the comparison, O stands for outcomes. So when you develop a research question, I need to include this PICO into my research question. So let me try to formulate our example, which I just told you. The current systematic review is aimed to evaluate the importance of the amount of sodium chloride that is required for patients with hypertension or renal failure, and to appropriately select the most appropriate dose of sodium chloride that is very helpful in improving patient outcomes like complete remission. So this is what is my research question. So I hope you understood about the research question. So whenever we develop a research question, we should have a proper statement. The statement should define about the population that we are including, the intervention like sodium chloride, or maybe a new drug. For example, I'm going to show you one study about St. John's wort. Okay, whether John's wort is helpful in patients with depression. So that's what is my intervention. I'm comparing with other antidepressant drugs, and I'm having an outcome of improvement of the particular patient's clinical symptom, or whether the patient is worsening, whether there's any adverse reaction with this particular treatment. So these are all called as PICO model. So the first step and the important step is the formulation of a research question. After we formulate a research question, the next step is to start searching for literature. We cannot just randomly search literature, because we might miss out some literature, some evidences might get lost. So it is very important to systematically collect all literatures related to that particular treatment or related to that particular disease condition. So we should not miss out any literature in the internet, or maybe in the database, maybe in the gray literature, unpublished articles, maybe in some research conference somebody has presented. So such articles are very, very useful. So all type of information must be collected very systematically. That is why we call it a systematic review. We collect all data about all evidences related to that particular clinical question. And next step is to literature search. How do you go about literature search? We have many good databases. You heard of PubMed database. All of us might have heard of PubMed. Okay, you heard of Google Scholar. You might have heard of Embase. You would have heard of Medline Search. So these are very important database for medical literatures, okay, related to medicine, because clinical pharmacists are often related to medicine. So we can search PubMed. You can also search some chemistry database. Right, you have many databases like a chemistry tox index. So we have very good databases. Okay, so we should not miss out any database, because there is a possibility of losing any literature. So we are doing a very systematic literature search, and that is very important step. The next, after you collect the literatures, you are including some data, some studies, you're excluding some studies because they are biased. Because sometimes some pharmaceutical company will publish an article and they will tell this drug is very useful, and some company will say, no, this drug is not useful. So we should select those studies which are not biased. So that is very important of selection of study, and we are excluding which are not worth studies, because some are not good, they are not dependable, because they are not precise, they are not properly done, they're not designed studies, they do not have a control group. So it's very important to select the very, very, very appropriate randomized controlled trials, because that is the highest evidence. And then we are doing literatures. We can also do systematic review with simple case studies. With simple animal studies also, we can do an animal systematic review. You collect all animal studies done in different countries, in different part of India. We collect all those data, and you reanalyze these studies, and you develop a particular conclusion, whether this, for example, I told you about St. John's wort, whether St. John's wort is useful in anxiety. We can collect all animal data. You can develop the data extraction, collect all the data, and then you can develop a conclusion. Yes, this St. John's wort is very useful in patients with anxiety. It is very useful in patients with significant depression. So these are all about the data extraction. The next step is to interpret results. I told you about after we collect the data, we are interpreting results. That's where meta-analysis is very helpful in interpreting the data. Meta-analysis is collecting the data. So systematic review stops around the data extraction and we interpret the results. This study, all these studies show that this particular drug is very effective. Then after that, we do the meta-analysis again, and then we prove that this particular study showed a very good outcome in terms of a pictorial diagram. So then where meta-analysis comes into picture, and interpretation of results are then very helpful in decision-making, like clinical guidelines, helping in introduction of any evidences in our particular practice. I hope you understood about the process or the steps of writing a systematic review, right? So now I'm going to the next step. As I just showing you the steps again. The first step is to formulate a question. These are very, very important steps of developing a systematic review. Formulating a research question, planning the review, comprehensive search of all literatures from databases, unbiased selection, inclusion, exclusion criteria must be applied, and studies that are not useful are rejected. They are excluded from the study, and those trials which are very well designed, those studies which are unbiased can also be included in the study. After that, we are critically appraising all the data. We are extracting the data from studies. We are then drawing conclusions, synthesis of data. Again, we are doing some meta-analysis like simple chi-square, simple student t-test can be useful in synthesis of data. And then you are doing something called as relative risk and odds ratio. That is where synthesis of data. And then we are including meta-analysis. Then we are interpreting the results in our real practice, whether this can be helpful in decision making, whether it can be helpful in real practice, whether it can be helpful in guidelines development. So this is where our decisions are made. So these are very, very important steps. That is why we called it as systematic review. We need to follow these steps very systematically. That is why if you don't follow these steps properly, then we don't call it a systematic review. It is just simple literature review. When you don't follow these steps, we can publish literature. Reviews are accepted in all good journals. If you don't do these steps, then we call it as simple literature review. Or we can also call it as simple clinical reviews. We can call it as simple critical reviews, critical appraisals of literatures. When you don't do it systematically, we don't call it systematic. We call it as critical appraisal of literatures. We call them as literature review. We call them as we call this envisage of this research. These are kind of things that we can call by different names. These are different types of systematic reviews. Okay, so now the first step, as you know, we are developing research question. So it's very important. I told you the model called PICO model: population, intervention, comparison, outcome. So population should be included in our research question. We are going to study the effect of St. John's wort. That is the intervention. We are going to study the clinical effect of John's wort in patients with depression, especially in pregnancy patient with pregnant patients with depression. And we are going to study the comparison with standard antidepressants like sertraline, like we have many other antidepressants like amitriptyline, okay, tricyclic like imipramine. We can compare St. John's wort treatment with standard or existing conventional therapy. That's our comparison. And we are going to see the remission of clinical symptoms or the decrease in the depression score. The depression score is usually done by a depression scale. We call Mini-Mental Score scale. We use that to calculate the amount of the extent of depression, Mini-Mental Score. And we are going to study the effect of a ability to decrease the score in the particular intervention. So this is all very, very important step during any review question. Okay, I think you understood what's PICO model. This is a very, very important steps during a process of systematic review. The next step, I just was talking to you about St. John's wort. All of you know about St. John's wort. You would have studied. This is a very common drug, mostly used in our country, like UK, UAE. Right now, I'm here. Plenty of people are using this drug called St. John's wort. You know, there is a, in the UK and all the European countries, St. John's wort is very easily available. This is available in any grocery store. We can buy this St. John's wort. People are using this for very common practice. They use it for sleep. Whenever they want to have sleep dysfunction, they start using this St. John's wort. So St. John's wort is becoming very, very important intervention from our side as clinical pharmacists. So I just want to show you an example of this case. Okay, this is my research problem. I hope you're all listening to me and you're able to hear me clearly. Okay. Okay, I want to introduce a patient who's a 28-year-old pregnant lady who comes to the clinic. She's been diagnosed with major depressive disorder. She was on SSRI, selective serotonin receptor inhibitor antidepressant called citalopram. This was her actual medicine. She was taking on these medicines. Then one of her friend suggested that St. John's wort is very helpful in treating depression. So this is what she had an idea. So she came to the psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist wanted to know whether I can give St. John's wort for this lady. She's pregnant lady. Now, as you know, citalopram is not safe because these drugs can produce depression. They can lead to a lot of changes in dopamine, and they can lead to toxicity. So the doctor wants to know whether St. John's wort can be given for her treating depression, whether it is safe, whether it is efficacy, whether it can control her depression, because she has having major depressive disorder. Psychiatrist asked the clinical pharmacist for safety and efficacy of St. John's wort. This is the real problem. Now, how am I going to approach this particular case? I am going to first develop a question, research question. I am going to start with the PICO model. The PICO model is the patient, the pregnant lady with major depressive disorder. The intervention is St. John's wort. I'm comparing with citalopram, and I'm going to see the outcome with decreasing in the depression score. So this is the research question. And now for this, I should develop a protocol. I must develop a strategy of search. This is why we always, whenever you do a research, we do a protocol, right? Without protocol, you don't do any research, right? So that's why we were to standardize, to make it very organized, to make it systematic. We always have a protocol. So we need to develop a protocol based on this particular search. Okay, now I am going, this is my research question. This is my research process. I am going to search all literatures from PubMed. I am going to search all literatures from Medline. I am going to search all literatures that are available from Google Scholar. I might search from all my library resources. And this is called gray literature. I might search all kind of Cochrane database. I might search for the Clinical Trials Registration Association. So all these things are some of the protocol that we develop. And then you are collecting the literature. Then you are going to appraise the literature. This is the approach to answer this particular question, whether St. John's wort is helpful for a pregnant lady in depression. This is what we draw conclusions. Okay. Next step, as after you develop the research question, the next step is developing a research protocol. This is a very, very important step. Again, the next step is developing research protocol. It is called a systematic review. That means it is organized search process. So it is not randomly searched in all database and you draw conclusions. That is the wrong process. That we can call it as a simple literature search. But whenever you do a proper systematic review, you do a proper review called protocol. How do you develop a protocol? So this protocol is also called as a roadmap. You know, when you want to reach a destination to your college from the airport, if you want to travel from the airport to your college, I must know a roadmap, right? You use Google Map, right? So if you go to the left, you are on the wrong route, and you might land up with, you might lose your time, you may lose your energy, you lose money. So that's why we use a roadmap to go reach your site on time, and we reach the college without any loss. So you have a map. That's how you develop a protocol. This is an explicit protocol. What do you mean by the word explicit? Means it is a defined protocol, well organized. There is no deviations required, and there is no loss. There is no deviations. So that's what we call standardized protocol. So it should be consistent. It should be very well. It should be reproducible, and it should be very explicit. It should be very validated, and it should be very precise. So that's why we use that protocol, very, very systematically developed protocol. I think all of us, all the faculty, all the research scholars are very experienced in developing protocol. So this is how a protocol should be developed in the standard format that is used in any research method, and we get approval from certain bodies. Okay, so I'm just showing you one example of a protocol template. We use templates from the PRISMA. PRISMA is one association which helps in guiding how to develop a research protocol. This is called a protocol template for a systematic review. So in the first step, you're giving a background introduction. What are the important population? So you know about depression. For example, relevance. What is our relevance? Is this study useful for patients? Yes, this study is useful because it's a pregnant lady who is wanting to know whether the depression is, whether it can be controlled with St. John's wort. Then you are does any evidence occur? Was there any other studies done? Was there any other research done? Justification. Is there a need for the study? Is there rationale for the study? the PICO components. What are the PICO components for the research question? So this is our research question, which is also called as the research objective. The research question is the guideline for the whole study. So that's why the research objective is made here. And then you are now having research strategy, search strategy, the method. What electronic basis are you going to search? Are you using PubMed? Are you using GOAT? For example, you're using Medline. Are you using PubMed? Okay, so we have to write all the databases that you're going to search. Then what are your key search terms? Yeah, what are the keywords we are going to use? I'm going to help you to learn how to search the key search terms. And then what are the sources we are going to use? And this is the inclusion criteria, exclusion criteria, and how are the language, English language, some are French, some are Chinese. So we are selecting the appropriate language of our study and we are ruling out the study. Then you're using quality check is done by Prisma. Prisma is a quality checking board. We can register our study in Prisma or in Cochrane, and it's a free database. We can register them and they will give approval for our study. They will help us in developing the research protocol. So Prisma and Cochrane are very good centers which can help in developing this particular data synthesis. How are we going to analyze the data? How are we going to interpret our data? This is what very, very important about our experience, what database you have, timetable, all these things are very good template. So this is a template is given by St. Duke's University. I have put it for you for reference. Okay, you can always take it from Dr. Lavanya. I have sent this protocol template to you. Dr. Lavanya can help her in distributing this particular template. Okay, so I have another checklist called Prisma. Prisma is a database, can help in improving the quality of research. So Duke's University link is also being given to you, and Prisma guidelines. We have certain guidelines how to do systematic review. So whatever I am talking is all part of these guidelines, Prisma guidelines. Okay, we have another database called Cochrane database. So this database help in registering this trial or our systematic review. When you want to do a research systematic review, you can register here so that they will protect us from other people will not copy this. They will not duplicate. That's why we always register this kind of systematic review in Cochrane. Cochrane is the best organization which helps in controlling the systematic review. Can you see this line here? This is called as a forest plot. This is a Cochrane is very helpful in developing forest plot. They are doing meta-analysis. This particular organization will register all meta-analysis studies, all systematic reviews. They will be registered in this database, and then only we can do such studies. So Cochrane database is a very good database that helps in registering the systematic review. This is a very authentic database which will we can register our study. If you want to do a systematic review, if you do it in a good systematic way, you can register here and they will protect us so that nobody will duplicate that. Yeah, that is what this. So there is another body called Prospero. This is also another organization. This is UK. This is UK body and this is Belgium. Cochrane is from Belgium. This is from UK. Prospero, this is a database. This is helping in controlling reviews. We can search this database to find out any previous systematic reviews already done. If they have already done the same research question, you need not repeat the same research question. So we must be able to be careful not to repeat, not to duplicate, because there are plenty of research questions you can develop. But it's very important. Unnecessary wasting time is very important. If you do duplication, then you are wasting time and then you are losing all that particular time. So that's why we need to check if somebody else has not done such a same research systematic review in the same research question. If the research question is different, then you can do a new research question. You can do a new systematic review. Understand? So, for example, many people have studied about this particular St. John's wort in normal adults, but nobody has studied on pregnant ladies. So I did a study in pregnant ladies. You get my point? So we should develop a research question which is very unique and not reproduced. Not somebody else has not done. We are doing something very unique, and that is very helpful for patients, because pregnant ladies cannot give normal antidepressant drugs. So I must select the most safe drug for this patient. So I am doing a systematic review. I'm just giving you an example. I didn't do a study in this particular St. John's wort. I'm just giving you an example of study. Okay, there are other databases which can help us in developing systematic review protocol. This like SPICE protocol, like it can help us in intervention, comparison, evaluation. This SPIDER is also one of the database, can help us in developing research protocols. They have many guidelines. They will help us. When you write to them, they will help you to develop and conduct. They will also help you in developing research questions. There are associations which will motivate to improve the research methodologies, like, for example, systematic review, and they are training young students, they are training faculty, they are giving a lot of help to all the people who like to do systematic review or meta-analysis. Okay. So now the next step is to find out eligible studies. You know, you have developed a research question. Now you have developed a particular protocol. Now you have to go about searching for articles. I told you about database. Embase is a very good database. It's from the Ovid group of population. You know, the Springer link. Okay, Midline, Cochrane database, Scopus database. If you heard of Scopus, right? Scopus, PubMed. PubMed is there. Sinhal is there. Okay, these are some of the database we always use. Cochrane database. So these are standard databases from which medical literatures are available. So this kind of database have all the medical literatures in the whole world. So if you do a search on all these literatures, you will not miss out any important, good designed clinical trials or good designed studies will not be missed if you are searching all these resources. You have gray literature called Google Scholar. This is the usual step our students like to search. So Google Scholar is a very easy database. We can search. You will get more articles in all these databases in the Google Scholar. So we need to search all these things. And if there are studies that are duplicating, we have to drop those duplicated items. Duplicated items should be dropped out. And those studies which are qualifying for the inclusion criteria will be included in our study. Okay. So we use something called as Boolean search. I want to use the term Boolean operator. So this is very important key search for all students. Usually we teach them in the pharmacy how to go about searching literature. So I am now sharing my screen. I'm going to Google Scholar. And in the Google Scholar, I am going to search one keyword. For example, I am going to use St. John's wort. Okay, John's wort. Okay, I searched John's wort in the Google Scholar. Now, if you see my screen very clearly, I have about 51,300 articles. This is too much, isn't it? St. John's wort, if I'm searching, I'm getting 51,000 articles. Oh no, this is a very big, difficult word. So I'm using one Boolean search. So what I'm doing, I'm going to search woman. And I'm using the Boolean search. Okay, I'm using capital letters A and D. Okay, women's and St. John's wort. Now, if I search, I will get decreased number of articles. How much did I get now? 20,000. So you remember it was 50,000. Now I reduced to 20,000. So now I am using another Boolean search, pregnancy. This is my important word, pregnancy, right? Pregnant. Pregnancy. Then I'm putting a star because it could be pregnancy, it could be pregnant, it can be any other term. So I'm using the word pregnant, and I'm using the word and. So it will select only those articles related to pregnancy, woman, and John's wort. I'm just selecting these articles. Now, if I do a search, now again it has come down to 20,000. It's not including much. So I'm just including pregnant. See, now I reduced to 7,000. See, from 50,000 it reduced to 30,000. 18,000. Now I reduced to 7,000. Very good, no? Isn't it? Then my number has decreased. So these are very key search. This is called explicit search or called Boolean search. Now I want to do another search. I want to do compare. Isn't it PICO model? No, I'm using pregnant ladies. P is my population. I'm using intervention, John's wort. Then I'm using comparison. I want to compare with sertraline. Sertraline. I'm comparing with sertraline. I want to compare this drug, efficiency of this drug. Again, now it has increased to 15,000, no problem. Okay, now it is increased. Now I'm going to use the word or. If I use and, then it's increasing, right? Or now I'm going to use the word or. So I'm going to see, these are different type of Boolean search. Instead of using the word and, I'm using the word or. Now I have come down to 8,000 articles. Now this is not enough for me. So I am giving some more search. Or I'm going to do, now I'm going to use amitriptyline. Okay, I'm going to do another search. It is down to 7,000. Then I'm putting the word and. If I do different type of search, I get different type of results. See, now it has come down to 4,000. So there are 4,300 articles which are discussing about pregnant lady, about intervention John's wort, about comparison drug, and amitriptyline. Now I did not give my disease condition, our outcome. So now I am going to do outcomes. Now I am giving my outcome. Outcome is what? Now major depressive disorder. I'm searching major depression disorder. So now if you see, you are getting now 3,000 articles. It has come down. Okay, then I'm trying to use depression. I'm using the word major, I will remove depression. 3,000 articles. So we are now narrowing down the search, and now we can search whether these, I'm going to search all these articles one by one, and then I'm going to exclude that study which is not useful. I will only select RCT. Can you see here? I'm using this randomized study. So you can see here, effect of hypericum perforatum, St. John's wort in major depressive disorder, randomized control trial. Yeah, I can select this study. And you see here, I'm going to select the study for my inclusion criteria because it's a randomized trial. So it's a randomized trial. I am going to see the effect of in the major depressive disorder, but whether they did it in pregnant lady, I don't know. I have to search each article. And if it is not done in pregnant lady, then I will exclude the article. And if it is done in pregnant woman, then I will select the study. I will include it in my research search, and I will do the data analysis. Then I will compare many studies. There could be, this is just one study. I could get about 50. This is JAMA. JAMA means Journal of American Medical. No, JAMA is Journal of American Medical Association. It's a very good article. So now next step, I'm going to look for PDF article, read the article carefully, and then I will include it in my study or exclude from my study. After I include the study, then I will do the data analysis. I hope you understood, right? So this is all about the method of doing research, okay? Okay, sorry. I'm going back to the particular trial, just a minute. So this is what I just gave an example of Boolean search. So we use certain terms with keywords called as the mesh terms. We use mesh terms to the keywords, or the research keywords are being done. So and operator, I use and, or, not. So these kind of words I can use along with during the search, and I can reduce the number of studies which are explicit. That means who study talk only about pregnant lady, who talk about ergot, who talk about other depressants, talking about patient randomized trials. I can add the word randomized trials also in my search, and I can get the articles what are related, and then I will screen those articles and I can include in my research called as systematic research. This is the best method of research. Okay, so now I just gave you an example, right? This 50, there's another lady, 50-year-old female who comes with major depression, and I'm using certain keywords. What are my keywords? Woman, female, depression, St. John's wort, hypericum perforatum, citalopram. Then I told you about sertraline. I can compare with many other. I can keep on using a lot of keywords and get the most appropriate drug about comparison between about St. John's wort with other antidepressant drugs, and find out whether they are clinically safe or clinically efficacious in controlling depression. This is how we select drugs. Inclusion criteria, exclusion criteria, very, very important, because some studies are not randomized studies, some studies are biased, some are observational studies, some are only just opinion. So we rule out unwanted studies and we select only those studies that are relevant, which are very specifically addressing our research question. So those kind of studies are selected. For example, I just want to show you one flow chart given by Prisma. See, there are about 3,738 articles about this ergot. Okay, I just took the study, ergot systematic review. 3,738 research records were discovered, and they were somewhere only 2,825 articles were rejected because they were not in the inclusion criteria. And then from the 2,834 trials after duplications, see, 3,738 articles were discovered, 2,834 articles were just narrowed down after removing all the repetitions and the duplications, and then 2,805 articles were seen. 9 full articles were studying for eligible, and at last only 2 studies were proved to have excuse me, sorry, only 2 studies had the evidence of a particular so at the end, there were only 2 studies that were included in the qualitative analysis, and these 2 studies were then used for systematic review. And there was a Cochrane article that was published. So I took this article from Cochrane database. They have published, having 1 article in Cochrane publication is equal to your lifetime achievement. You're a best scientist in the whole world. if you have one Cochrane database, because you have done a systematic review, you have done a meta-analysis, and I want to show you how easy it is to prepare an article on Cochrane. See, I just gave you an example of ERGOT. So this was an actually published article from Cochrane database. They have done the study. They have concluded with a study only with 2 studies. Only with 2 studies, they have done this particular research, and they have published in Cochrane database in 2017. That means last year, 2 years back, they have published this article in Cochrane based on a systematic review. So I just gave you now an idea about data collection, data extraction. The next step is data collection. After you do the selecting of the study, we collect the data, and then what are we doing? We are doing an analysis of the particular accuracy. We need to find out something called as the relative risk ratio. So what is relative risk? This is a formula we use to calculate the efficacy of a drug. Odds ratio is useful in collecting the safety of a drug. Okay. For example, you have 2 groups of population, that is exposed population. This is called treatment group A, B. That means, for example, improvement. For example, if there is an event occurred, that means patient improved with therapy. Okay. So if there is a patient improvement, yes, A. With exposed therapy, A, then we call A. B. B means they have not improved. Okay. So then this is the control group. Control group is not exposed group, and they have some people will have placebo effect, isn't it? Some placebo effect, some people will improve, some 10% of people may improve, but in the treatment group, there will be 20% improvement. So 20% improved, but in the placebo group or the control group, only 5 people improved. So that's called C. And in the placebo group, there were more patients who did not improve. So there was no improvement in the placebo group or the control group, but there were less patients in the non-effective group. So we have this formula. So relative risk is used to measure the efficacy of a drug. A divided by A plus B. C plus D. Hello?
Yes, sir.
Am I able to hear? Okay, I may extend for about 5 to 10 minutes more. I'll try to finish soon.
No problem, sir. Continue.
Can we extend time? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
How much
yes,
of
sir.
time? How much of time can you allow me?
It is Google Meet only, sir. You can extend, no issues, sir. You
Okay.
can complete.
Maybe 10. Can I finish in 10
sir.
15 minutes? Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So you are able to listen to me, and there is audio clearance. Okay. Everything's okay, no?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. You're able to understand. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Now I was just talking to you about data analysis. So I'm just giving you an example of a study with ERGOT, for example. ERGOT people who were treated with the ERGOT or the exposed people, there were certain percentage of people improved. Some people did not show improvement. But in the placebo group or in the control group, some people improved. Only a few people improved, and there were more number of people who did not have improvement. I'm using the formula called relative risk. Okay, relative risk. Relative risk means the efficacy analysis. So each study we are supposed to calculate this called relative risk. Study number 1, it showed 10%, 1% improvement. Okay, if the relative risk is more than 1, that means the drug is very effective. Okay, are you all listening? Hope there is no sound disturbance. Can you all unmute your mic, please? There is sound disturbance. Thank you. Okay. Okay, I was just telling you. So whenever we calculate the relative risk, if the formula, after doing this formula, if you get a value of 1, that means the drug is not effective, not safe. It is in the middle. If it is more than 1, that means the drug is very safe. If it is less than 1, that means the drug is not effective. This is what we come to conclusions based on the relative risk. So study number 1, what is the relative risk? Study number 2, what is the relative risk? Study number 3, what is the relative risk? Study number 4, what is the relative risk? So we have list of studies. For example, now we have only 2 trials in the ERGOT, right? In the ERGOT, we have 2 trials, RCTs. In the first trial, it showed improvement more than 1. In the second trial, it shows less than 1. That means first trial is showing clinical improvement. The second study is showing clinical no effect. That means we need to do a justification. We need to find out more studies that are supporting. If more studies are having high relative risk, that means it's having better efficacy. If there are less studies on efficacy, that means the drug is not effective. So this is how we calculate relative risk. So there is another formula called odds ratio. Odds ratio, we find out about adverse reactions. If the drug is producing side effect, for example, ERGOT, we are trying it in a pregnant lady. If it is done on a pregnant lady, and if there is any adverse effect to the mother or to the fetus, then we call it an adverse event. So if there is an adverse event, for example, in the treatment group, in the exposed group, we call A, in the B, we call no adverse event. In the control group, if there is any adverse event, we call it as C, and if there is no adverse event in the placebo or control group, we call it as D. So we calculate odds ratio using the formula A by B divided by C by D. So this is what we call odds ratio. If the odds ratio is more than 1, that means the drug is toxic. Okay, if the odds ratio is less than 1, that means the drug is safe. You get my point? So relative risk, if the value is more than 1, it is very effective. If it is less than 1, it is not effective. Odds ratio, if it is more than 1, that shows it is toxic. The drug is not safe. But if the odds ratio is less than 1, that means the drug is very safe. We can give it in pregnant ladies. So I hope you now understand about safety and efficacy. Efficacy and safety. Efficacy, we are using relative risk. For the safety, we are using odds ratio. This calculation is done for each study. For example, in trial number 1, there were 100 patients. 50 patients took test drug, ergot. For example, our St. John's wort, 50 people were treated with St. John's wort. 50 people were with control group. They did not receive the ergot. They received only escitalopram. Now, I am going to study the effect in 50 people. Out of 50 people, 40 people were improved with ergot therapy. In the control group, only 10 people were improved. So 10 by 40. So how is the formula? 40%, right? So it will be 40 divided by 50 group. The 50 group is the control treatment group, right? So 40 people improved in the treatment group. But in the control group, 10 people improved. Only 10 people improved out of 50. So now if you calculate, we can find out the relative risk will be more than 1. If it is more than 1, that shows the drug is effective in trial number 1. In trial number 2, we have to do the same risk ratio. And in trial number 3, trial number 4, we have to do risk ratio and find out if the drug is effective. Then you are making a forest plot. That is called meta-analysis. You make a forest plot in a graph. If you show it, the same data study number 1, what is the RR ratio, what is the OR ratio, you show it in a table format, in a plot graph, we call it as meta-analysis. Is it easy? Yes, it's very, very easy. Nothing to be afraid of. Okay. Okay. Now, what are the? So we have certain softwares that can help in meta-analysis. Okay, meta-analysis. They are very helpful. RevMan is a very free database. It's available in Cochrane. All of you can download this RevMan. It is by practice. You enter all the data from each study, and then you will find out what is the relative risk ratio, what is the odds ratio. It will give us directly. You need not calculate. Need not use the formula directly. It will give you the data exactly. It will give you confidence interval also. So it is very useful. RevMan is a very good database. We started using it, practicing it. Even our first year, second year students also are using RevMan database. It's very helpful in doing meta-analysis. So we can help with the odds ratio. Relative risk ratio can be calculated by this RevMan software. And it will also develop a plot, forest plot for us. It will develop the meta-analysis easily for us. It's very, very easy now. Okay. This is called as a forest plot. After we did the RR ratio, correct? We did the RR ratio. This is called relative risk. Can you see here? This is the relative risk ratio. So this is the intervention group. I told you about the intervention group. What is intervention group? Our simple St. John's wort group. In the John's wort group, 1% out of 131 people had treatment, had improvement. Okay. And here in the control group, 2 people had improvement. In the control. This was a study by Rowling, J.K. et al. Okay, this is the same study I'm just showing you, which shows that only 2 people improved. So the forest plot is less than 1 because the drug is not effective. You can see here that population who recovered is less, so it is less than 1. Okay, in study number 2, Albus et al. In 2003, they have done the study, and this was an intervention group. There were 7 people who improved after 279, and control group 9 people had improved. So still it is less than 1 because drug is not effective. So another study in 2005 by Hermon et al. They did this study. 3 people out of 1 or 2 patients, they improved, and only 1 patient in the control group improved. So the ratio went above 1. This is called as the null point. This is called the line of no response. This is 1. Can you see? The relative risk is 1. If it is more, that means the drug is effective. So only 1 study shows it is effective, but all other studies are negative. So now there is a total. Now we are doing an analysis called total analysis. I'm doing this analysis. Total 512 patients were done. Okay, at 131, 229. So the total population studied were 512. This population was number was 542. So now I am doing weight, that means this 100% weight, okay? So now I am doing the relative risk ratio for this called weighted average. I am taking the average of each study and I am taking the forest plot. This is called as a forest plot. This is done by the Revman software. Revman software will give us. Can you see here? The first study, relative risk was only 0.5. That means it is not effective. In the second study, it is 0.84. It is the negative side. It's not 1 or more than 1, right? It's less than 1. So the drug is not effective in these two studies. In the third study, you can see the RR went above 3. That means the drug is very, very effective in this third trial. Third trial, it shows 3. So in an average, if you see all average, the overall study shows a relative risk of 0.087. That means our St. John's wort is not effective in patients with pregnancy. This is our conclusion. Can you see now? It is less than 1. The relative risk is less than 1. So the drug is not effective in pregnant ladies for controlling depression. It is used as an anti-anxiety drug for patients, not for depression. Okay. So this is what is the conclusion. 0.87. So the drug is not effective. So this was a study published in Cochrane database. Can you understand now how Cochrane database is done? By simple formula using relative risk ratio. All of you are able to understand this relative risk calculation. So relative risk is very helpful in calculating the effectiveness of a therapy. Odds ratio is useful in measuring the safety of medicine. Okay, now I am going to show you odds ratio plot. Okay, so this is an odds ratio plot. Can you see here? Odds ratio is shown here. Odds ratio is calculated for each study. Baron et al. This is about 10 to 12 studies are here. Okay, safety about the St. John's wort study. They have taken many studies. Intervention. Okay, you can see the population who have been studied. Okay, so 26 out of 29. We are 32 out of 34. That means there is more toxicity. So here you can see it is more than 1. So the toxicity is 1.85. Very high toxic. That means if it is more than 1, this is called as the line of normal null reference or null effect. This line, center line is called null. That means 1. You know, when our OR ratio is 1, it's called null effect. So if it is more than 1, that means the drug is toxic. The first study shows the drug is toxic. The second study shows that the drug is toxic. It is more than 1. It is 12.7. That means more toxic reactions have been seen. So it is not safe in pregnant ladies. So 1.27 is more toxic. Okay, this study by Davis et al. 1967, they have done the study. It shows it's toxic. In patients with somebody else in 2002, they have shown 1.03. Okay, so it ultimately, when all this was pooled and when we compared the average, it was 1.21. That means the safety odds ratio was more than 1. So the drug is not safe in pregnancy. So it is toxic. That means there are more side effects than the therapeutic benefit. So this drug is not the right choice to be given in pregnancy for depression. So I have answered the question, right? So the pregnant lady is not safe. Intervention of St. John's wort is not safe. The comparison between the other antidepressants is not safe. And outcome, it is not effective in therapy. It's not effective in controlling depression, but it is more toxic. That's what is the conclusion from the study. So this is also another study which I just show you. This is from the Cochrane database I have taken. So odds ratio. What is the formula for odds ratio? A by B divided by C by D. That's all simple, right? That's all about formula, right? So it's a simple formula we can use here using odds ratio. A by B divided by C by D. So this is how odds ratio is calculated. And then you are plotting it in a graph. That's called meta-analysis graph, called forest plot. Understand? And if it is more than 1, it is not toxic. That means odds ratio was 2.73. It is high. 3.75. It is very high. Okay. In which study? In one study, Mr. Rescue 2013 study, it shows 0.9. Only one study showed it is very safe. This particular drug was safe. So that means all other studies and overall it was 1.91. That means more than 1 means it is toxic. This particular drug was toxic according to the forest plot called meta-analysis plot. So these are all about how to develop a plot. Okay. I hope you understood about how to develop a research protocol for systematic review, how to do the data analysis, how to do the risk ratio, how to do the odds ratio, and how to interpret this odds ratio and risk ratio based on forest plot. Forest plot means it is called meta-analysis. If you don't do this only just with simple analysis and you tell this study drug is safe, not safe, then it's called systematic review. Okay. So now how to see the quality of a systematic review? After you develop the research systematic review, you have to check whether the question is appropriate. This is called quality control, quality appraisal of your systematic review. Check if it is called the research question is focused, whether it is very specific, whether it is explicit, and then you find out whether you are including the right study, like randomized clinical trials or observational studies or cohort studies. You have to specify very clearly, find out whether this study is appropriate for that particular research question, find out if all the literatures have been done. You searched all literatures, Embase, PubMed, Medline, okay, Google Scholar, all these databases were searched clearly, then it is a good quality research systematic review. If it is a good quality studies, you have only selected only good quality randomized study, it is a good quality randomized systematic review. And if it is a precision, if the results are very clear, 1.09% clear. You know, for example, I just told you about odds ratio, that means the drug is toxic. That means more than 1 point is toxic. So if it's very precise, it is very clear, definition, defined outcomes, and if the study population is very clear and it can be repeated again, somebody else who does the same systematic review will also get the same result, then it is very, very good systematic review. It's a good quality systematic review, and you should consider not only safety, you should consider also efficacy. Efficacy and safety both should be done. Some study will tell this drug is very efficacy, but they will not talk about side effects. But here, whenever you do a study, you should do both relative risk and odds ratio. It should not only be safe, not only effective, it should also be safe. So you have to do both RR and OR. If you do both, then only you know that your systematic review is a successful one, and you are able to publish it in the topmost journal like Cochrane database. You can publish it in New England Journal of Medicine. You can publish in the Lancet, British Medical Journal, everywhere you can publish. So every student, including PharmD student, right from first year, they can do this analysis. Okay. So I think now I given an idea. RCT is having more evidence, very good quality of evidence. Okay, some studies are not published, so they have not good quality. They are published only in a journal, only in a conference, for example. So such studies will not have much weightage like RCT trials. Okay, so this is about the quality of bias. You know, some people are pharmaceutical companies, they do the clinical trial. They will tell that the drug is very effective. They will not do the safety. So it's called bias. So they have bias. They are telling that this drug is very effective, but they will not at all discuss about pregnant lady safety, about drugs toxic in the liver, whether it is toxic, producing toxicity in the kidney. They will never discuss. So this is called biased study. So whenever a study is biased, that means they are not good quality. They must be excluded. And whenever you do a systematic review, you have to identify this kind of risk bias by certain software. We have some risk of bias analysis, whether it is a selection bias, the population selection. Some people might select the wrong population who are already having mild to moderate disease, and they will tell it is very effective in mild to moderate, but they will not be effective in severe illness. So that kind of selection bias might be there. Okay, people performance bias about the study model itself. The study design is not very accurate. They did not do multiple point analysis. They did not do a baseline analysis, second analysis, third analysis. They did not do follow-up testing. Some patients will be lost to follow-up. These kind of people might be lost. So this kind of bias will be hidden, and they will not show it in the real publication. So this kind of bias will be identified by the systematic review analyst, and they can identify it in the systematic review. You have to tell there were 5 studies done, 4 studies were unbiased, only 1 study was biased, so I did not include it in the study. So we can show it that these kind of studies are biased or whether they are not biased, so that we can give very good quality evidence for clinical decisions. Yeah. Okay, so how to take decisions based on practice is based on RR ratio, OR ratio. If the RR ratio is more than 1, you can implement in the clinical guidelines. If the RR ratio is less than 1, that shows it is not, it is more safe. Yes, it can be included in our trials, but in our guidelines. But if the study is showing more toxicity, if the odds ratio is more than 1, that shows it is not safe, it is more toxic. So decisions are made based on this toxicity. One good example I want to tell you how meta-analysis is very helpful in decision making. So when you do anti-statin therapy, all of us know statins. They are used for decreasing cholesterol. So we have atorvastatin, we have simvastatin, we have now lovastatin. When you want to do a comparison between which drug is safe among all this group, it has been proved that atorvastatin is having best efficacy. Why? Because maximal dose, it is the 60%. It can decrease cholesterol by 60%. So it is having best efficacy. Okay, 50% in reducing LDL cholesterol. So it is having very good evidence. So you're including it in our clinical guidelines. So triglyceride levels, it is able to reduce 29% according to meta-analysis and systematic review. It was proved that it has very good 60%. It is the highest compared to lovastatin. Lovastatin had only 40. Pravastatin 34, Simvastatin 47, Fluvastatin 24, Servistatin 28. Among these 5 drugs, among the 6 drugs, atorvastatin has the best option in reducing serum LDL. It was able to reduce LDL cholesterol by 50%, which is highest compared to all drugs. And also triglyceride, it was comparatively higher than all the drugs. So we recommend that atorvastatin is the best choice for patients with hyperlipidemia. So all these things are done based on evidence, based on clinical trials, based on the calculation of RR ratio or the relative risk ratio. You calculate, you can find out the intention to treat. That is also another formula we are using, intention to treat. And these kind of formulas can help us in identifying which drug is better than the other drug. So now doctors can decide that atorvastatin is better than simvastatin. Now we have a latest drug called rosuvastatin. Rosuvastatin was launched only in 2018. There are very good trials, and it's showing rosuvastatin is better than atorvastatin based on, again, new systematic reviews. So these are all new evidences that are being created, and they are being helping in improving the outcome and decision making. So based on the result, based on such studies, we can learn application. We can learn how we can transfer the results, how we to implement in our real practice, how we can help in decision making. Okay, so let me summarize the whole content. Since I had 1 hour, I have taken 20 minutes. Sorry. Now I just want to summarize the content. Summarizing, we have studied a brief overview about what is systematic review, how systematic review is different from meta-analysis, and how they are the highest quality of evidence. Then we learned how to do a systematic review. I showed you about development of research question, using the PICO model, that is the patient intervention comparison outcome model. And then we are learning how to develop a research protocol. We have template from the Prisma template. We have the Prospero template. These are a group of organizations which help in supporting developing good research in systematic review. You can take help from them, and they will always convey they are in UK and in USA. They are very helpful in developing, in encouraging and training students, as well as faculty in developing the systematic review. And I went through one course from the Johns Hopkins University. I went through that, and I have given you the link in my link to the net I have given you. So all of you it's a free course. It's in Johns Hopkins University. There is a free course on systematic review, how to develop the systematic review, how to publish. And once you are publishing, you can publish many articles. You can publish 10 articles in a year, and also you can develop your university. Your university name will become big. It will be a world recognized university all over the world. If you publish one good systematic review, your university will become a world renowned university. This is my prediction for all of you. Thank you very much. Okay. This is the resources. I told you about the course that I did. St. Johns Hopkins University. I have given you the link. You can join this course. It's a free course, and you can take training. Cochrane is also providing training. Can you see? I have given this link for you. All of you can go through this training. Best of luck to all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I take this opportunity to propose the vote of thanks on behalf of Parul University, sir.
Okay.
And actually, it was a short notice given to you.
No problem.
And
No.
Really, it was good, sir. And based on this, our students will be benefited. And
sure.
Really, everyone doesn't know this much like regarding what are the difference comparison between systematic review and meta-analysis. Yeah. And it was really
simple. Yes.
Yes, sir. It was a good enlightened with the knowledge and presence of yours. And I would like to thank our principal sir also for his support.
Yes.
And also for the digital thinking to Mr. Brijesh sir. It was continuous, and there was the link was very good.
Yeah.
And there was and also not, but the least, I would like to thank our students also for the active participation. And in between, they have messaged also. It was really nice and helpful for them to carry out their projects and all. And from as you said, it will be very helpful for them from the second year onwards, and it will improve the career growth. Yes, really.
If you have one publication, if you have one publication, you can get admitted in foreign universities like USA, Cambridge University, Harvard universities. They will take students who publish in good journals. They will take for post-graduation PhD. They can do very well. Yes.
As you said, when they come to the third year or fourth year, they can eligible to publish, and they are ready to publish also.
Yes. Faculty can help them. Yes.
Yes, sir. Really,
Thank
thank you for your support
Okay.
and your
Yeah,
presence,
yeah,
everything,
always there.
sir. Okay,
Thank you
sir.
for this opportunity.
Thank
Bye.
you.
See you all. Thank you. Bye
Yes,
bye.
sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Dean
Yes.
sir. Thank you, the technical issues, and thank you all the faculty. Thank you all for this. I want to thank the students also. Thank you so much. Bye. Thank you,
Yes.
Mr. Brijesh. Bye. Bye.
Yes. We can end up. What to do?